Sure, if you're not at this, what else are you going at? There's nothing better than going around the harbour having a yarn. Alright, boys, well, I guess this is welcome to episode 1 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast with myself, Harbour Customs, otherwise known as Adam Hatter. I haven't actually landed on the name of the podcast yet, boys. I'm sure by the time I put it out, I'll have it one or the other. Harbour Yarn is one that got brought up a couple of times. It's one I had in my head since probably the start. Tangliest Trial was another one too, but we'll see. It'll be one or the other. Whatever the name of it is, boys, we're here. You can get me on all my socials. I'm on TikTok is like the main one, I suppose, at Harbour Customs. But I'd imagine this is going to live on YouTube as well. Try to get it out on Spotify, see what happens. But certainly you'll find me on TikTok. I'm just starting to get on the Instagram now. It feels like someone about 80. Getting on the Instagram. But starting to branch out a little bit of my content onto Instagram as well. So you might see me come across your screen over on there. So how did I get started with all of this? Well, it started out with TikTok. Myself and the wife got into TikTok, I suppose, when it started coming on Steam somewhere in 2020. We were big Vine fans. Loved little 7-second Vines, but that kind of went by the wayside. We got on this new TikTok one, a little bit of shagging around on that. I started out some of my old saved Snapchats that I used to be sending the boys, all foolishness and all that. I said, geez, I'm going to throw that on there now, because it's a good laugh now for myself, a good laugh with the boys, so someone else might get a laugh at it too. Got on there, started putting the old Snapchats out. Then got on a little bit of a riff with my accent, because I'm from the Southern Shore, also known as Irish Loop here in Newfoundland, and if you haven't keyed into it yet, there's a big similarity with a few of the dialects that you'll find around in Ireland, so that started coming on stream on there, I suppose. I started riffing off that. I still riff off that a bit. And after that, it's just hot takes, old stuff I find amusing or funny or regular daily going-ons that I find I can get a kick at. And yeah, that's the content that's going out now. Another big part of it for me was giving people who aren't in Newfoundland anymore, they got to be living away, whether it be for work or for whatever reason, giving them a little piece of home, giving them a little piece of Newfoundland, even if it's in like a little 30-second snap. If they can get them back to home for that 30 seconds, that's well worth it too. And like, you know, that's a big thing I'm after doing with a bit of the content that I'm after putting out on TikTok. Why are we moving to a podcast? Well, we're not moving to a podcast. A podcast is going to be another tool in the toolbox, I guess, of all this media content. I got the idea. I was over in Ireland traveling around there a couple of hitches ago. I met up with Davey Holden, and I've been talking back and forth to him on TikTok, just the similarities in content, whatever else. He said, Hatter, drop down, or I said I was going to drop down to Kilkenny. He said, Hatter, I'm interested in doing a podcast. He said, I've never done one before. Would you be interested in doing it? I said, geez, yes. I said, whatever you got on the go by. I said, we'll come down and have a yarn. I ended up there with him for about 2 hours, having a couple of pints, having a good yarn. And I had a wicked laugh, and I left that after. And I said, you know, that's something that I could probably get into myself. So the past couple of trips over in Belfast and kind of been kicking around in my head. And this last trip over, I said, you know what? I said, let's get it together. I'll build a little studio. What do you think of the studio, boys? I think it's all right. We'll build a little studio and we'll start getting some longer form content off the ground, because I think I could have a nice bit of fun with it. You know, just being able to harvest little bits of content, add the podcast, to throw up on TikTok for the short form stuff. Still great, but be able to have the longer form stuff, to have a good yarn, my own takes on stuff. And hopefully in time have a few guests on board too, and just have a yarn back and forth with them, get to know them a little bit better, and just have a dandy yarn, a dandy laugh with them. And interacting with ye. It's just going to be another, I guess, facet to be able to do that. Because I always interact with the comments. I'll always try to get back to you with the messages and DMs and everything like that. But hopefully here on the podcast too, we're going to get a good bit of your experiences and maybe stories from you fellas. Read them out, and I'll have generally a large laugh about it all on here. So yeah, that's basically how that idea was born. I said we'll get into a little bit of longer form content and have a laugh with it. The studio here, like I mentioned, I put it together this time home. I think it came together fairly well. The idea for it first, I would have loved to had a stage somewhere down along the water and do all the recording down there. Now here on the Southern Shore, it's a rough all shore, and there's not a lot of stages like you find at a lot of other places. Newfoundland, the shore is not really... we got a rough all shore along here, and it's not a place that you have a lot of stages. So with the lack of the stages that's around, it'd be a lot harder for me to try to jump into someone's place now and try to use that for a little bit of a podcast studio. You want an older one. There's not that many to choose from anyway. I don't have any myself because I got no land on the water. So this will do for now. We might move somewhere else in time, but I think this will be a dandy spot to actually get her off the ground. And like I say, just be able to get a few people in and have a good yarn with them. To me, once I actually built it and started trying to do a couple of recordings down here and just playing around with it, trying to figure out all the equipment and all that, it feels like I could be in VOCM. Right in VOCM Valley, in the studio with Paddy Daly. And I give the boys a sneak peek on TikTok there, that was yesterday. Just to show them what I put together. And I got a couple of people come back with that too. Like, oh yeah, like, geez, it could look like it could be there. And I had always, like, that's one thing I always said. If I wouldn't head offshore, I'd love to be in doing open line. Now, I'd never get my foot in the door too. I got no background in that at all. But if I ever could, I always thought that'd be a grand laugh because I always enjoyed with Paddy, well, certainly all the hosts on open line since I've been listening to it. But I always enjoy what Paddy does on there, between the good conversations, the tough conversations, and helping people out, because he does a lot of helping out with people on that show. So, you know, only a little small thing, but it puts me right to mind of that. So, you know, you can't complain about that. So, for the podcast, I got like a loose running order kind of done up. It's not set in stone, by no means. You know, as we get through a couple of episodes and all that, we'll see what works, we'll see what doesn't, see what sticks, see what don't. And go from there. But I got a loose running order. One of those segments for the running order is what's on the go with me right now. So me right now, summertime, I'm enjoying my summer. We're having deadly weather here in Newfoundland this summer, at least in this portion of the island. And I'm enjoying summer to the fullest. I got some time off in July. That was one of my rotations off because I work 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. So I'm only getting a portion of the summer anyway. But the portions of summer I did get were good. I got early in July. And now I get the latter part of August into the first part of September. The weather been deadly, boys. And I loves mountain biking. I spends a lot of my time out in Kitty Vitty in St. John's. We got some dandy enduro-style mountain bike trails out there. That's all I've been at, boys. I've been doing a lot of riding. It's been dry here. The riding been deadly. So yeah, that's been my summer so far. But like all good things in life, it usually ends up coming to an end or wrapping up for a little bit, and I got to go back to work next week. So right now, normally I work offshore, so I'm about 200 miles off the coast of Newfoundland on an FPSO oil rig, and I do 3 weeks out there and 3 weeks home. But the rig had to come out of the water for a big oil refit there, a life extension, and there's nowhere big enough in Canada to be able to take her out of the water. So they sent all the bidding overseas for a couple of yards. Belfast ended up winning the contract. Now, boys, there's a lot of places you could go to do a refit on an oil rig or a big boat. A lot of them wouldn't be so fun for the crew, or so good for the crew. Like, it'd be out, I won't say out in the middle of nowhere, but the next best thing. Belfast is not that, boys. Belfast is deadly. Been going back and forth there now since February, and it's basically been like a little second home to me. So I've been doing 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. We just went back to 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off here lately. Boys, what a nice city that is. I mean, the thing that really drew me in since I got my feet on the ground in Belfast and like started getting laid land for it, the trade sessions, boys. Like, I knows we have them here in Newfoundland, but they're sparse. And I don't do a whole lot of going out in downtown St. John's now, so I wouldn't be so much in with it. But any night of the week in Belfast, I mean, they got their regular routings that they'll do for the trade sessions, but you can walk in, take in a bit of traditional Irish music, and the talent, boys. I mean, there is some serious talent among the people who plays at these sessions. There's one young fella in particular, he bees at a lot of the sessions that I does on my rounds during the week. He just won All Ulster and All Ireland with the elbow pipe or the uleen. Now, I might have botched the pronunciation of the uleen or the elbow pipes, but that's what I'm going with. What an amazing hand to hear to play that instrument. And if you don't know what it is, do a little bit of Googling of it. It's like a mini set of bagpipes, but it's different. It's a different sound to it. Boy, it lends itself pretty well to traditional Irish music. And since I've been going around over there too, I'm after hopping in on a couple of these sessions. I never ever done anything like that in my life before I went over there. But in getting around with the boys and having a couple of pints with them and all that, I started doing a little bit of singing with them. And I got to say, it's probably one of my favourite things about Belfast. Now, it's one of the things I look forward to most when I'm going back over. And Yeah, so that's just one part, trade sessions. The food over there is wicked. They got a lot of deadly restaurants, a lot of different restaurants. It's a little bit rushed in the evening. We don't get off till about 7, quarter past 7 in the evening. So time he gets a shower and goes out, sometimes it's a little bit hard to get a bit of grub at some of the restaurants. But I tell you, it is nice. And the nightlife there in general. Like any night of the week, you can go out and about there. It's a fun city. The people are deadly. After having that many dandy yarns with a lot of different people, both from Belfast and people that are visiting Belfast, boys have been solid. And one thing I've thought about now, especially the past couple of hitches, is going to be a hard transition back to offshore for myself. Because when I'm offshore, your work's 12 hours a day. You get off for 12 hours in the evening, but you're 200 miles off in the middle of the Atlantic. There's not a lot to be at. I mean, you can go to the gym, you can socialise with a few hands, but you just spend all day with them. So generally, you want a little bit of downtime, some decompression time for yourself. And I mean, it's that for 3 weeks. Whereas I've been in Belfast now since February. I gets off after a 12-hour shift. Now I got the option of I can go out and get a different type of meal. I can just get out and walk around, get out and have a pint, get out and go to these trade sessions. I got a lot of options. I can still live my life in the evening. Whereas I always says for offshore, you're kind of stuck in the vacuum. Life outside of work goes on hold for 3 weeks until you can get back in. Now, that 3 weeks that you got home, they're all yours. So, I mean, a saying I'm after taking a liking to this year is there's pros and cons and everything. And as long as there's more pros than cons, you'll stay at what you're at. If there's more cons than pros, you should probably give it up and find something else. For me right now, there's still more pros than cons, even when I'm offshore. So, all that being said, whatever hard the transition is going to be when I get back offshore, we'll cross that bridge when we got to. And for the time being, we're still going to enjoy life and enjoy what Belfast got to offer until we sails away. So yeah, that's pretty much what's on the go with me. The other night, actually, I was doing up notes for this podcast. And the night previous, I was just sat down on the couch scrolling on TikTok. And I've never been much for the TikTok lives, but there's a fella, I think he's from Central or possibly Trinity Bay, one or the other. The Feller Pine, you'll find him on the socials, you'll find him on TikTok, Instagram. Solid fella. Anyway, he was doing a live. It was late in the evening, the sun was just going down. He was alongside of a pond. Water was like glass, boys. Beautiful, beautiful evening. He had a little mug up on the go there, a little fire on the go with a cup of tea. And I sat down and I said, Jesus, like, what a nice little thing he have on the go there. So I interacted back and forth with him a little bit there, sent him a couple of comments and all that. It was dandy. I got to say, I said, boy, this live that he's doing here is awesome. Anyway, that was it. Went on about my business. So the next night I'm sitting down doing up notes for this podcast. And I said, Jesus, I said, I'm going to throw around live. I said, just see what it is. I was sat down having a pint and throw around live. I said, because you can interact a little bit more. Like I'll always interact in the comments and all that I get on TikTok and Instagram, whatever else. But it's a little bit different when you can interact in real time. So, Jesus, I threw that on. I must have been on for a couple of hours until the phone died anyway. And it was a good laugh. It's not something I'm probably going to make a habit of doing, but it's something I'm probably going to try to do more of because it was a dandy laugh. Like I say, I like 70 yarn with you fellas. And yeah, so look for more of that as time goes on. You might see me on live every now and again. That's about it for that segment of the podcast. Moving on. What I'm going to try to do in these podcasts, boys, is every podcast I does, I'm hoping to have a topic. And that's going to be one segment, just a topic. I got a list of topics a mile long, well to do me enough for the rest of this year. But I'm looking to get a topic, but more so looking to interact with you fellas and see what your experience is with the topic or maybe some stories you get on the topic. So ahead of the podcast, probably on TikTok or on a podcast, I'll try out the topic and I'll be looking for you fellas to send me a DM, send me an email, harbourcustomsnl@outlook.com. Just get a hold of me and drop me those experiences or those stories and I'll read them out on the podcast just so we can save a deadly old yarn. I've seen different people do it on different forms of media in a similar sort of way and it generally works out fairly well and, you know, all hands has a good laugh on it and it generates some good content too. So, as time goes on, you see these topics that I'm doing, I'm going to put them out onto the socials and all that for you to respond to. If you got anything that you figures is worth sharing or that you want to share, send it along. We'll have a dandy old yarn will. So, for episode 1 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast, that's what I'm going to call it now. We're settled now. Tangley Astral, off to the side, we're going with Harbour Yarn. For episode 1, the topic that I was looking to do was harbour legends. Now, what is a harbour legend? To me, and growing up in Witless Bay, a harbour legend was someone that was memorable in the community for one reason or another. Usually it was something funny. There's someone that you thought of when you think about the community. A fixture in the community, I suppose you'd say. Generally, it's for something funny. One story or another doesn't make a harbour legend, but a collection of them over their lifetime does. And we definitely got a few harbour legends around Witless Bay. Characters, I suppose you'd call them. Now, you can have harbour legends even if you're not from a harbour, even if you're not from Newfoundland. You can have characters all over. I'm sure everyone, wherever you're listening from, you probably got a couple of people that you think of in your community that, oh yeah, like I could class them as a harbour legend. Listening to the two Johnnies, this two fellas on the go over in Ireland, they got a song called Small Town Heroes, and I'd imagine that's about the equivalent of a harbour legend. If you haven't heard the two Johnnies, boys, look them up on their socials. They're deadly. I listen to their podcast every week, and the clips they put out is wicked. I actually got to see them while I was over in Cork. They played a show for their album release. But if you haven't heard of them, boys, look them up, the two Johnnies. And if you have heard of them, and you never heard that song, Small Town Heroes, look that up. That is a dandy, dandy tune. But it's much the same as our harbour legends. So memorable people in the community, usually for a good laugh. So I put that out on TikTok probably only last week. I never got much in the way coming back on it. We might do this again on episode 2. Maybe we'll stick with the harbour legends topic if I get any come. Even if not, we'll move on to something else. But I'll share a couple of my own harbour legend stories from Witless Bay in the meantime, just to give you a little bit of my perspective on it. Won't give you no names. The boys don't need any names. If you're from the community, you'll be able to nail them off right off the bat. If not, I'll just leave it to your imagination. The stories is just as good, and you don't need their names put out any more than what they do. One is a fella who was a really good family friend of our family. He lived just down the road from where I grew up. He's passed on now, God rest him, but he was a harbour legend in every right, and because of the collection of stories he'd accumulated, even from long before I come along, but right up into his later years and all that. And he was a solid fella. Do miss him now. But he had a couple of wicked stories. You'd be getting around telling yarns about the fella, right? And one of those stories is he was rumoured to be the only man at the Bay Bulls garden party, God knows what year it was, but the only man at the Bay Bulls garden party to leap a chain link fence in a single bound. Now, boys, I don't know if you've ever jumped over a chain link fence. I have, or I've attempted several times. Now, sometimes I've cleared her, but I've always put the two hands on the chain link fence and hopped over. Scatter time, you catch your foot, you ends up down in a pile on the ground. Could lead to a bit of badness on the end of it, depending on why you was jumping over the chain link fence for pure sport or if you were trying to get away from something. But to leap over a chain link fence in a single bound, boys, pretty good accomplishment. He was also the only fella that was rumoured to be able to stand on a beer bottle barefoot and then take his other foot and touch it off his nose. Now, boys, if you knew a fella, he's not what you'd call athletic-bodied, by no means. Well, he might have been back in his day, too, because I only got me take on him in the later years of life. But when I think of him, it's not someone I think be able to do that. But, boys, you got to have some sort of a balance to be able to stand up on a beer bottle with one foot and touch the other foot off your nose. I don't know if I'd be able to do it stood up on the floor there, steady by me Dunlaps. So something else. Now, like you say, those two stories about him there, that don't make him a harbour legend, but it's a collection of all those stories, coupled with the man that he was. Yeah, he's a harbour legend, never right. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll have a good laugh. Just a couple of them stories. He's a fella too, like, we'd always, or a lot of times, and we still do now, haven't so much in the past few years, but go around mummering in the Christmas time. If you don't know what mummering is, boys, Google it, because I'll butcher my definition of it. But it's basically dressing up and getting on, going around visiting people in the community around Christmas time, and seeing if they can guess who you are, having a couple of drinks, playing a few tunes, having a couple of yarns, having a good laugh around Christmas. And I remember a good few Christmases going down to his place and sitting around the kitchen table, having a couple of beer and having a couple of yarns and all that. You can't buy them memories, boys. And yeah, definitely miss them. Moving on from him, another fella that's still in the community. I grew up with a young fella. We used to be beating around a lot years ago when we were growing up. He was getting a new skidoo for the young fella. and they were looking around. He went out to a dealership out in St. John's and looking around on them all. He settled on an MXA 550. Now, boys, 'tis not a light machine. If you got her back down in the snow, you'd tear the back out of yourself trying to get her up out of it. But he goes around looking around at all the machines. Now, lad, he settles on the 550. And he bent down, grabs the front bumper with his one hand, lifts it up to about chest height, and looks underneath it. Now, boys, if you knew fella, he is a big old fella. He's the old strong, strapping fisherman. That's what he is. But even still, to be able to take a full-size Skidoo by the front bumper, hoist it up to your chest level and look in under it and said, oh yeah, nice machine, and then just drop it on the floor, you're dealing with a special specimen there, and that's exactly what he is. So they settled on the machine, brought it home, started using it for the winter, had a lot of trouble with it, boys. Every time you turned around, there was something wrong with that machine. So he got fed up with it. He was calling back and forth out to the dealership, couldn't get no sense out of them. So the one morning, he backed up the ton pickup to the garage, shoved the 550 up the back of it, drove to St. John's, backed her into the front step, took her body and bones and flicked her out on the step, stuck his head into the door and said, she's your problem now, boys. I'm not coming back till she's fixed. Now, when said fella throws that in on your doorstep and you sees him glaring at you from in through the door, you're going to fix the machine. And he got it done in short order. Funny fella, boy, but a nicest kind of a fella too. I don't want to paint him as a poor fella or nothing like that. Nicest kind of fella you meet, have a dandy arm with him, but I tell you, if he figured he was wrong, he was going to get the right end of it, and he did that day. So that was him. Another fella. He's a carpenter by trade. I would say a rough carpenter, like usually be framing up houses and doing renovations, stuff like that, exterior. So the fella he was working with at the time couldn't have a lot of work on the go, so he had him inside doing a little bit of finish work, a little bit of trim, putting on doors, hanging doors. So the only reason I know this story is my buddy was working with him this day. I had worked with him previous outside doing exterior renovation and all that, but my buddy was working with him this day. So he was going around putting all the doorknob sets on all the interior doors. So he was going along at it. He got to the last one, put it in, and went to close the door. Door wouldn't close. Opened it, closed again, wouldn't close. He looked. He had all the strikers in the doorknob sets put on backwards, so they were just banging off the latches, wouldn't close. He had that done with every single door in the house. This was the last door he come to. He looked down, and my buddy said the pure look of disgust on his face. He just looked at the door, dropped the tool bag down, said, "Boy, I'm no good for this today," and walked out the door. That was it. He was done, right? And you can just hear him saying it. And he jumped aboard the car and he went on. Another time I remember all a lot of the fellas from around the community were over in Father's Shed one day, sitting around having a couple of beer, having a good laugh. And one of the boys had his car hauled halfway in the garage, so he had no cutlass, that the world of her. And had her hauled halfway in, the bonnet of the car was there in the garage. And somebody told a good enough of a joke, it must have been a good gut buster, because said fella, the big, strong, strapping fisherman, got a good laugh at it and laid the fist right down on the bonnet of the cutlass, put the big old dent in it, right? Because he's a big, strapping man. All the boys looks, and then, that led them more laughing. And even the fella who owned the car, what else could you do but laugh? Right? Like, geez, what do you think you're going to pass it down through? What are you trying to do? Beat her up? Like you say, boys, dandy all laugh, and memories that you can't buy. I'm going to end off at one, but I'll put it out there. If you got any harbour legends or characters from around your community that you got, send them in along, boys. Send us a DM. Send us an email, harbourcustomsnl@outlook.com. Send it along, boys. We'll read it out. I'll have a dandy all laugh at it. I'm sure we all will. But lend her off on this one. Another fella in the community, years ago when the cab moratorium came in the early 90s, wasn't a lot of fish on the go. So there were still fellas fishing, just they weren't allowed to be at it. One fella got caught. They got caught dead to rights, fishing when he shouldn't have been fishing. So they never had, whatever way it all worked out, they never had him in the actual boat that he was using, but he had to give up all the equipment he was using at the time. So, and the boat was one of them. So they came up to fisheries, I suppose, and he said, we're going to have to seize the boat. Which boat is yours? So they went up to Lower Palm where all the boats is too. And he looks around, he said, yep, that one over there in the corner. Looks over at the boat in the corner. The boat is half submerged. She's handy up to the gunnels in water. She don't look like she moved in months. They said, that boat there. They said, yep, that's the boat. That's the boat I was in. That's the boat I was using. I mean, to look at it, she probably haven't untied the line now. God knows when. But they never had him in the boat, so they could only go off what he said. Okay, that's the boat, that's the boat. They puts her in the trailer, goes on. This wasn't the boat he was in at all. The boat he was in, he had shoved away somewhere else. This was a boat that was put out the first of the season, not in use, and pretty well almost ready for the scrap. He went over after that, paid fella for whatever he figured the cost of the boat was so he could keep his own boat. And that boat went on to be used in the harbour for years and years. I believe she's still in the harbour, actually. He's since got rid of it, but I think somebody else have her in the harbour now. You can't make that up, boys, and I'm sure the like of it still goes on, but Jesus, even still telling that story now, this bring a smile to your face, right? So that'll do it for that portion of the segment, or that portion of the podcast, segment of the podcast. So this week, Harbour Legend, we might carry on with it next week. We might not. We might have a new topic out. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. See how much of it that we get seen. So like you say, boys, if you got any good old characters or good old stories, send them along to us. We'll all have a laugh. The next segment that I'd look to go on to, obviously we're not going today because it's just myself here in the studio, but we're going to try to have some guests on. And I got a short list of guests that I'd like to have on. Different people from around Newfoundland for various reasons. People around TikTok, people that you might notice or people that you might recognise from around Newfoundland for one reason or another. We'll get them on. We'll just be an informal dandy old yarn about themselves, about whatever topics is on the go right now, and just have a laugh with it. And that's what I'm hoping to do. Probably going to be a couple of episodes before we get set off the ground, but yeah, we'll have someone in along, just a yarn back and forth. If you have anyone that you'd like to see on the podcast, if you have anyone that you'd like to see on the podcast, or even yourself, if you'd like to hop on, send us a DM, send us a long message, boys, and we'll see if we can't get you on. It's all about having a dandy yarn and a dandy laugh, and I definitely think we can do that here in this little space. So, if anyone comes to your mind, send us along. But no guests today. Just myself. You'll have to deal with me. All right, moving on to that. Another segment I'd like to do here on the podcast. Each week. It's definitely not going to be a weekly podcast, boys. Maybe twice a month. Bi-weekly, if you're familiar with that term. But another segment I'd like to do is I'm going to go through VOCM, our beloved local news station here in Newfoundland. I'm going to have a little browse through VOCM's webpage and take a story off there and just do a little bit of riff on it. Just have a little bit of yarn about it. I looked a couple of days ago. There wasn't a whole lot of note. There's a lot of talk about the wind turbines now that are getting put up in Newfoundland. A lot of heavy talk. You hear that on Open Line a lot. But yesterday, the news story broke that there was a alleged drug bust out around the bay. One of the things that was seized in the drug bust, among all the other things, was a Ferrari. Now, boys, if you're partaking in that level of activity, anywhere, but more so especially around the bay, the vehicle of choice to be flaunting all your profits would probably not be a Ferrari if you're worried about putting any heat on yourself at all. You can probably count on two hands how many Ferraris there are here in Newfoundland. I'm going to say there's not many, boys, all right? There's not too many. Most of them are in St. John's. You goes out around the bay and you see someone zipping around a Ferrari, you'll twist the neck off you'll twist the head off your neck. But if it's someone you know that's from the community, the first question you're going to ask is, how did they get that? What are they at to get that? Usually win the lottery. You could say that. But if you looks around and you know this fella is probably sketchy at best, he haven't worked in the past few years. If he did, he's only bumming around at this and that. But you think he could be into a bit of the badness. The Ferrari is really only going to seal the deal with all that. Now, boys, 'tis not a world I'm familiar with. But if I had to put myself in that situation, you know, you was into a bit of the badness, I don't think the first thing that would come to my mind for a good idea to keep the heat off myself would to be buzzing around the harbour in a stolen Ferrari. I would think that's going to draw a bit of an unwanted attention to yourself, like, you know, just bam around all 99 Cavalier. It'll fit the bill for what you're at. That's what I would think. I don't know. I'm not in the situation, so maybe the Ferrari, he figured, was the best thing. But anyway, that's what's on the go here in Newfoundland week. Buddy had a stolen Ferrari. Now, and bringing it back to that, a stolen Ferrari. How do you steal a Ferrari? Like, I don't imagine somebody is running up to the shop and saying, oh yeah, I'll run in there now, leave the keys in the Ferrari, leave her running. and somebody gets in her and goes on. Like, I'd imagine all them supercars, like, they probably got GPS trackers in them. Like, you don't think a Ferrari would be something to be easily stolen. And I can't imagine it'd be easy to hot wire them either, right? So, is hot wiring even possible now? I don't know. So, like, how do you steal a Ferrari? And then the hot Ferrari, how does that, how do you, like, oh yeah, boy, I got a Ferrari if you want that. You know, she's, don't get no registration with her, but have her. I don't know, boys. And then to couple that with trying to keep heat off yourself, well, like you say, he's nipped up for it now. Allegedly. I don't know no more than that, Hannah, only by VOCM got me told, but I know all the meme pages in Newfoundland and the Facebook are popping with the old Ferrari around the bay memes. Worth your time to go look at a few, boys, because they're a good laugh. But anyway, I suppose that'll get worked out in time. So yeah, that's the topic for this week. The stolen Ferrari in the alleged drug bust at around the bay. Can't see how you can see it, boys, but you'll see it all before he goes. There's no doubt about that. And VOCM will be the ones to tell you. So that'll wrap it up for this episode 1 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast. Like I say, boys, there's going to be more to come as we get our feet and start rolling with this. I'm really excited to be able to get a few guests in and have a good yarn with them. That's going to be a lot of fun, I think. And that should create a lot of good yarns and a lot of good laughs. But keep following along with us. Like you say, you'll see that in episodes that are to come. I don't know who's going to be on first. Like I say, I got a long short list there. Whoever fits in the schedule, I suppose, really. Yeah, we'll get them on. We'll have a good laugh. If you made it this far into the podcast and, boys, you're still watching, I really want to send across a thank you, and I do mean that. Thanks a lot for following along to this point. This is harder than what I thought it was going to be. Like you say, you figure you just throw up all camera there, talk into all mic, and that'll be about it. But there's a bit that goes into it, and this is only the first part of it. I got to go now and try to figure out how to mix and master all this into a finished product that I can actually put out there on YouTube for you folks to consume. And by the time you see this, I'm either after managing to do that, or you'll never see it because I'll just get frustrated with it all and throw it all down. But you know, there's a bit that goes into it. So if you follow along to this point and you're enjoying the content, thank you. You know, I do appreciate you following along and the interactions, if you're more so at that, along the way. All good. Keep following along on all the socials, on the TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I'll keep everything updated on that as I'm throwing out topics for future podcasts and whatnot. I'll always post them out on there. You can send along your thoughts, experiences, stories, whatever, on said topic or on whatever. Just send them along if you got any suggestions for guests. Anything at all, send it along. I'll do my best to respond back to you. I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast. I had a pretty good laugh here recording it. And stick around. Hopefully we'll see you for episodes down the road. To sign her all off, boys, arrive alive, VOCM cares.